So 2021 was another miserable year for literally everyone except me. I personally had a great year. Got a new job, bought a house, got to work on some incredibly cool personal projects with some incredibly cool people, played a bunch of Dungeons and Dragons, listened to some hella good music. Okay, so there's still that pandemic thing out there killing people and ruining everyone's lives, and the video game industry has been getting increasingly predatory and insidious, and the brain-dead charlatan who led the free world has been replaced with a ghost of a brain-dead charlatan, and my own country continues to idolise and support a party which brazenly flouts its own rules and lines its own pockets, and according to climate change experts there's a chance we'll all be scrubbed from this mortal coil by the sun before I even finish this sentence. We good? Cool. But yeah, what I'm trying to say is that despite all of that, this year has had its upsides. And this list is going to give a brief rundown of my 10 favourite upsides to release this year. Before I start, I want to give an honourable mention to Wildermyth, a game which would be in the running for my game of the year if I hadn't only played it for the first time yesterday, and as such have no idea how even half the mechanics work, never mind whether or not it has a respectable amount of replay value or a strong ending. It seems cool though, check it out if you like For the King and XCOM and wish they had a love child. Anyway, without further ado about nothing, let's get on with the list. Kicking off the list proper, we have Bravely Default 2, a case of renowned JRPG maker Square Enix throwing a bone to those in their fanbase who like JRPGs. Technically the third game in this woefully underutilised franchise, this new game continues the traditions of its predecessors by providing a challenging, nuanced take on the turn-based combat popularised by Square's flagship franchise, Final Fantasy. This game uses a class system which allows you to mix and match skills and abilities, and gives you a nice amount of customization over your roster of 4 adventurers, and then goes on to provide a series of well-balanced encounters which give every class their opportunity to shine. The story is a bit generic JRPG in that it flits between almost painfully twee and shockingly dark at the drop of a hat, which can admittedly feel a bit jarring at times. There's enough genuinely solid content here to scratch the itch for any long-time fan of the genre. Also, it has a collectible card game minigame which immediately wins it some serious bonus points. All games should have a collectible card game minigame, even collectible card games. Anyway, if you have a Switch and like JRPGs of yore, then I'd encourage giving this one a bash. Maybe then we'll actually see another turn-based RPG with a decent budget. So let's get this out the way. Golf Club Wasteland's gameplay isn't anything special. Don't get me wrong, I enjoyed finding ways to utilise the various machinations of the terrain in order to pop my golf ball in as few strokes as possible. It obviously evokes real-life mini-golf, or the sort of particularly good flash game that gamers of a certain age will remember subtly playing on the down low during IT classes at school. It's fine, it's fun, but a simple 2D golf game would never have made it onto my Game of the Year list on these merits alone. What wins this game that prestigious honour is how it sets the scene. You spend the duration of the game listening to a fictional radio station which exists to provide Earth nostalgia for the denizens of Mars after an apocalyptic event forced the human race to flee the planet. It paints a brutally vivid picture through various characters calling in to provide their personal stories, through infomercials detailing the difficulty of life on a nigh inhospitable planet, and through a selection of original songs in various styles which are all genuinely well crafted and enjoyable listens. On top of this, you have some top-notch environmental storytelling, as the downfall of Earth and the story of the lone golfer unfold with each ball potted. I was originally going to play this game on the channel, but after 30 minutes I stopped the recording because I had no desire to keep talking over the brilliant sound design, and instead sat and played the game to completion in a single sitting. Best waste of an evening I've had all year. One of my favourite pastimes this year was half watching some garbage on Netflix while taking yet another run at one of new Pokemon Snap's courses to see if I can't get me a slightly better picture of a Lycanroc for my collection. If, like me, you adored the original N64 Pokemon Snap and its cute spin on the concept of a first-person shooter, then you probably should give this one a spin. It runs considerably longer than the depressingly short first game, offering not only more courses but a bunch of options within those courses. Visiting them at different times of the day or after achieving certain scores will provoke different behaviours and appearances by more Pokemon. And that's on top of being able to encourage neat little interactions by utilising a constantly broadening array of tools. Seeing Pokemon in the wild like this is as fun an experience as it was back in the 90s, breathing personality into the creatures beyond taking turns to hit each other with attacks, and the sheer amount of secrets and challenges available makes this game endlessly replayable in a way that the first game never was. It's fair to judge the Pokemon Company's approach to game development in recent years, but with this seemingly innocuous spin-off game, they have genuinely upped the ante. Let's just hope Game Freak can take the ball and run with it when it comes to next month's Legends Arceus. Please? As much as I love this type of subversive horror game, I have to admit it's a concept that's been quite thoroughly done before at this point. Even without knowing anything about the game, the name alone, Buddy Simulator 1984, is enough to make any seasoned indie nerd go, hang on, something tells me this fella might be a bit less Mr. Rogers and a bit more Mr. Rogers in edgy Newgrounds animations. So I very much knew what I was getting into with regards to the subtle creeping horror and the uneasy vibes this game is laying down. What I didn't expect was, and apologies for the minor spoilers here, the story to have such a genuinely sad ending, such a complex concept, and such a wide variety of splitting paths dependent on my actions. What I also didn't expect was a genuinely robust turn-based with timing combat system which could draw comparisons to Paper Mario if Paper Mario thought it was Silent Hill. Finally, I really didn't expect this game to keep quite literally evolving as I played it, beginning as a series of text-based number games and eventually becoming a full Final Fantasy style adventure RPG, and then continuing to go even further beyond that. On top of all this is a whole host of smaller moments, of game within a game subversions and creepy character stories, of plot twists and audio-visual spectacles which provide constant intrigue and edge-of-your-seat entertainment as you explore the world crafted by your buddy. Apologies to Pony Island, but this just became my new recommendation for anyone looking to see what happens when the concept of a game is turned completely on its head. So I'm going to take a hard stance here. You ready? All buckled up? Okay. Resident Evil 8 is the best Resident Evil game. Like ever. Bear with me before you start trying to figure out how to send anthrax through the internet. I have my reasons for this claim. So I like 7 a whole bunch. After 5 and 6 were only a hair's breadth from turning into Gears of War clones, 7's focus on surviving, on avoiding the monster of the moment, on frantically solving puzzles and hoarding resources for when you really need them was a breath of fresh air, and felt like a modernised return to the claustrophobic fear of the first few games. 8 took that concept and built on it, injecting some of the campy B-movie humour of the early games to spice up 7's drab trappings, and utilising an almost Mega Man-like level system where each of the 4 major antagonists has their own themed zone to overcome. This idea in particular made the game feel way more varied, as each boss came complete with their own take on horror, some being more psychological, others preferring to actively hunt you, while the final stretch encourages you to put your growing collection of weaponry to use. These stages are tied together by a hub village which becomes increasingly dangerous as your actions open up its secretive secret parts, again feeling like a fun nod to the original games as opposed to the more linear modern entries. My only real criticism here lies with the blank slate protagonist Ethan and his complete lack of any personality, but honestly there's enough personality in the supporting cast to more than make up for that. So yeah, I'll say it again, Resident Evil 8 is the best Resident Evil. Come at me, internet. Probably the most obscure game on this list, 2D and Top D caught my eye on Twitter of all places, and had me eagerly awaiting its release from the moment I understood its core premise. Essentially, you play the 2 titular characters, one of whom lives in a classic Mario-style 2D side-scroller, while the other lives in an original Zelda-style top-down world. The twist is that they're both on the same screen, with Top D literally living on the wall behind 2D, and needing to solve increasingly more intricate puzzles in order to facilitate the more classic platforming segments. As the game progresses, it becomes devilishly clever, with swapping between the 2 characters becoming a frantic game of tag, utilised to avoid boss attacks, trap enemies, race moving screens and bypass hazards in one of the most ingenious puzzle platformers I have ever played. The bosses and final stages in particular were brutally difficult and require not only some rapid puzzle solving, but also near perfect execution to overcome, and the satisfaction for finally piecing together the winning formula is second to none. This is all tied up in a neat little light-hearted story, and culminates in a final stage which takes everything you've learned and turns it on its head. Conceptually, this game is brilliant, and then it went hard on milking every last drop of entertainment out of that concept's implementation. Hey you. Yeah, you. Do you like Zelda? No, not Breath of the Wild, I mean like the classic Zelda formula. The explore a steadily unfolding, tightly designed world wherein you conquer dungeons, slay bosses, gain new abilities and solve side quests, Zelda. You do, good start. How about challenging platformers with a broad range of movement options which test your timing and movement skills in a series of increasingly devious obstacles? How about we set all this in a Hollow Knight, or dare I say, Dark Souls style decaying world packed full of cryptic NPCs and intriguing background lore? If any of that sounds interesting to you, then I urge you to check out Blue Fire. Don't get me wrong, it's a little rough around the edges, some of the design decisions can be frustrating, and it can occasionally look a little visually cheap. But at its core, this game is endlessly compelling and stupid fun. The sort of challenge that practically forces my lizard brain to keep trudging onwards, to overcome the next hurdle and see what this neat little game has to offer next. I feel like the tiny indie team behind this game catered it specifically to my tastes, and it genuinely didn't disappoint. Also, I think it had some free DLC lately, so my very cool Let's Play won't quite give you the full experience anymore. Fuck, I'm gonna have to go replay this now. Oh boy, how do I talk about this game without spoiling everything that makes it great? It was crushing when... there. And I can't believe was... like a knife to the heart, that was. Well, in lieu of talking about the incredibly poignant story and all of the nuanced subtleties and powerful character moments which built up to the game's climax, I guess I'll touch on everything else that made Omori great. Gameplay-wise, it plays like your classic RPG Maker style game, albeit with slightly more complex combat fueled by a stat-altering emotion system and a neat little friendship combo system which encourages you to plan out your moves pretty carefully on the more difficult bosses. The artwork is pleasant, the overworld sprites adopting colour palettes to evoke the mood of each scene, an effect also reinforced by the on-point soundtrack, and the in-battle and cutscene artwork is in equal measures gorgeous and terrifying. But obviously the real draw here is the story, and in that area Omori is a real triumph. I'm talking up there with modern classics like To the Moon. Stuff that seems inconsequent is ultimately just a setup for a later payoff, and even the stupid joke characters and moments are compelling enough to make Toby Fox jealous. If you like narrative in your games, then you owe it to yourself to play through this, or maybe just watch a Let's Play by some devilishly charming British YouTuber, eh? Despite my love for its predecessor, I really wasn't prepared for Psychonauts 2 being as good as it is. To be fair, I replayed the first one recently and it still holds up, and you can tell it was used as a framework for the new game. Despite tweaks to the physics and Raz's controls, the main playstyle of the game is largely the same. Instead, effort was clearly put into expanding Raz's arsenal of abilities, into broadening the complexity of boss fights and the variation of normal enemy encounters, into nailing the ingenious level design and optional content. The real highlights here though are twofold. Firstly, the gorgeous graphics, the deformed cartoony style being twisted into a series of increasingly bizarre set pieces, spanning from a cooking show to a psychedelic cartoon to a noir cityscape to a demented propaganda theme park ride at a pretty incredible pace. The second highlight lies in the story. Without getting too heavy on the spoilers, this game has more plot twists than an M. Night Shyamalan movie, more absurdist humour than a Monty Python movie, and more genuine heartfelt moments than a Hallmark movie if a Hallmark movie was good. As I said, I never expected this long-awaited sequel to compare to the original, but honestly, I found myself struggling to decide which of the two is a better game. I guess now I have to play Rhombus of Ruin. Earlier in 2021, I played through a little game called Axion Verge 2 on my Switch. It was a good time. A serviceable Metroidvania with fun mechanics, a unique approach to boss fights and a solid soundtrack. It missed my top 10 list by a hair and was a fun to play pastime for a few days. Why am I talking about this, you ask? Well, Axion Verge 2 was essentially my control group when I went into Metroid Dread, a comparison point to use when I explored whether or not Nintendo's classic franchise could hold up to its modern equivalents. And oh boy did it ever. This game was incredible. The movement feels slick, almost reaching the buttery levels of Ori, and posing its own challenges as half of Samus's abilities require timing to use correctly, making a perfectly timed series of space jumps, a flawlessly aimed grapple beam, or a well-timed slide feel so much more satisfying. The level design is incredible, with areas evolving as you progress and rerouting the player through their maze-like corridors filled with secrets and interconnected passageways. The boss fights are challenging and monumental, providing dramatic highs and encouraging creative use of abilities to overcome the monstrous creatures of ZDR. The divisive Emmy robots are, to me, a real highlight. Mixing up the gameplay with survival horror elements as a series of increasingly more dangerous and nigh indestructible robots stalk you through the halls. Even the 2.5D visual style, a graphical approach which I didn't like much initially, won me over by helping the world feel more alive and expansive. Do you know what I did the minute I finally overcame the climactic final boss fight in Metroid Dread? I started the game again from the start. FromSoft's life-consuming catalogue aside, I haven't done that with a game since I was a kid. Say what you want about Nintendo, and God knows I do, but goddamn do they know how to make a good fucking video game. And so it ends. Another year, another roundup of things I thought were cool. I genuinely had a tough time ordering the top 5 entries of this list. They're all incredible and worth a look, even if you hate video games. God knows I do. Anyway, my true game of the year is Gunstar Heroes for the Mega Drive, which I played for the first time this year and therefore counts. It's very cool, like Cuphead but for old people. Look at that little fella go. Bang bang. Can you tell I have no idea how to end this video? I hope not. I hope I'm coming off as very professional and talented. Bye.